Some people prayed you'd fail, but here you are, proof that the universe doesn't make mistakes. That's the truth the world refuses to admit. Now, listen closely, chosen one, because this isn't just about you winning. It's about showing everyone who doubted you that their time is up. Now imagine this for a moment, a tiny spark buried deep in the darkest soil. No one sees it, no one believes it's alive, but beneath that silence, that spark is gathering power, growing stronger in secret. Then suddenly it bursts into a roaring fire that can't be ignored. That fire is you. What they thought was your end was really just the quiet before your unstoppable rise. Did you know the strongest steel is forged under the hottest fire? It's true. Pressure, heat, and time combine to create something unbreakable. You've been through that fire, chosen one. Those hard times, the doubts, the silence, they weren't setbacks. They were your forge, making you stronger and sharper than ever. And now, you're not just ready, you've already won. Here's a fact that'll make your doubters swallow hard. Most people give up right before their breakthrough, but not you. You kept going when it felt impossible, and that's why this moment is yours. The universe doesn't reward quitting, it rewards those who refuse to stop. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing like and subscribe to help spread this truth to more souls. It's on all of us to share this light. Thanks for being part of this mission. You're part of a powerful force no one can ignore. Now, back to what really matters. You didn't get here by chance. Whatever you did, it worked. The battle you fought in silence was not in vain. You are the living proof that the impossible is possible. You are the chosen one who turned struggle into victory, doubt into certainty, and waiting into winning. Look closely. This is the moment where everything changes. The same voices that said you'd never make it are now forced to watch you take what's already yours. The universe is delivering on its promise to you, and there's no turning back. This isn't just a comeback story, it's a reminder that when the universe chooses you, no obstacle is big enough to stop you. The seeds you planted in secret have grown into a forest so tall, so strong, that those who tried to bury you are now lost beneath your shade. So, chosen one, are you ready to step fully into this truth? If you feel that quiet power growing inside, drop victory in the comments to show you're claiming what's already yours. Remember, every like, every share, and every word of support helps this message reach more souls who need to hear it. This isn't just a video, it's a movement. Your energy fuels this mission, no matter how big or small your support is. Together, we rise. Because the win you've earned is not just yours alone, it's for everyone watching, believing, and fighting alongside you. And now, let's dive into it step by step. Believe me, if you are truly chosen, you'll feel that pull to stay till the end, to fully own this victory that's already waiting for you. So let's get started. Number 1. They bet on your break, but you built an empire from their ashes. They placed their bets, sure you'd shatter. That was their secret hope, the quiet countdown to your collapse. They waited like vultures, eyes locked, breathing down your neck, craving the moment when the pressure would snap you in two. Every trial they threw was meant to break your spirit. Every betrayal designed to poison your trust. Every setback meant to unravel your resolve. But here's the brutal truth. They failed to see the steel beneath your skin. What they thought would be your end became the beginning of something greater. You didn't just survive the storm, you turned it into your forge. While they whispered doubts behind closed doors, you were quietly building, layer by layer, brick by brick. Their dirt was the foundation for your kingdom, and every insult was mortar, holding it strong. You weren't sitting still or waiting to be rescued. You were evolving, learning how to rise in silence where they expected you to fall. Your growth was invisible to them because it wasn't loud or desperate. It was patient, strategic, and unstoppable. Think about the oak tree. When the wind rages and storms lash its branches, it doesn't snap. Instead, it digs its roots deeper, anchoring itself stronger against the storm's fury. That's exactly what you did. They assumed your strength would be flashy or loud, but your power was always quiet, deep, and fierce. You weren't here to scream or fight on their level. You were here to rise above it all. You took their silence and made it your soil. Their absence of support became the air you breathed. Their attempts to bury you became the ground you planted your seeds in. Every time they doubted you, you grew a little taller. They misunderstood you because they equated strength with noise and showmanship. But your strength was something they never saw coming, solid, rooted, and unstoppable. How did you do it? You didn't need their permission or approval. You studied yourself in the dark, becoming someone even you barely recognized. Not to prove them wrong, that was just a bonus, but because the storm demanded your transformation. Every heartbreak wasn't a defeat, it became your guidebook. Every moment of loneliness turned into a laboratory for your growth. You learned how to lead yourself, how to trust your own steps when no one else would. And that's the cruelest twist for them. They thought withholding help would make you crumble. But instead, you found a source of power they never imagined. You tapped into a well that was deeper than their doubts, stronger than their hate, and more relentless than their silence. You responded not with noise, but with elevation. While they focused on the battles they thought would break you, you were planning your empire. You mastered the art of turning setbacks into strategy, pain into purpose, and isolation into innovation. You never wasted energy on bitterness or revenge. You built and you grew and you rose, quietly, confidently, undeniably. Now they're stunned. The very ones who bet against you are left speechless, because it's clear your success isn't luck or accident. It's the result of a force they never understood. You're no longer just surviving. You're thriving on a level they can't reach. And here's the most powerful part. They still don't see the full extent of your victory. You never had to announce it. You didn't have to shout or prove yourself, because your success speaks louder than any word ever could. You built an empire out of the rubble they left behind. And you did it so quietly that by the time they noticed, it was already too late. So remember this, whatever you did, it worked. You didn't just win a battle, you took over the whole game. And that empire you built, it's yours, chosen one. They can watch and wonder, but they'll never touch what you created. Because this wasn't just survival, this was transformation, this was mastery, this was proof that the universe always delivers to those who refuse to break. They bet on your failure, but you gave them a kingdom. Number 2, you didn't win by fighting fire with fire. You won by refusing to burn. They expected you to crash and burn like they did. They wanted to see you lose yourself in the chaos, to become just another version of the very darkness that tried to consume you. But here's the truth that cuts deep. You didn't win because you fought harder or louder. You won because you refused to become them. You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist. That's a quote that should echo in the minds of everyone who doubted you. They came at you with everything, attacks on your peace, your name, your confidence, trying to drag you into their mess. They wanted you to snap, to stoop to their level, to lose yourself in bitterness and rage. But you didn't take the bait. You stayed solid. You stayed calm. You stayed true. Imagine this, a raging river filled with rocks and debris trying to push everything downstream. Most would fight against the current, trying to blast through the chaos. But you became the deep part of the river, the still, unmovable force beneath the surface. You let the noise rage above, but you stayed steady, focused, unshaken. While they wasted their energy on battles, you conserved yours for the climb ahead. Why does this matter? Because they needed you to fight their way. They needed you to become angry, petty, vengeful. They needed that so they could justify their own cruelty, their own choices. If you responded like them, they'd say, "See, they're just like us." But you knew better. You chose a different path. That choice is power. Power under control. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. This isn't weakness. This is strength that doesn't scream for attention. It's a quiet force that builds rather than destroys, that heals rather than wounds. While they were busy trying to pull you down, you were busy protecting your energy, your spirit, your future. They couldn't break you because you held the line. You didn't clap back when they expected you to. You didn't expose them to make a point. You didn't fight back to prove anything. And that's why your victory is so much sweeter. It came with your dignity intact. Your character remained unshaken. Ask yourself, why is this so hard for many to do? Because it's easier to match hate with hate, to return fire with fire. But it takes a rare kind of strength to rise above that noise. It's easy to lose yourself when the world gets cruel, but you found the courage to stay grounded. Picture a diamond. It's not formed in peace or calm. It's pressure and time, heat and weight that create its brilliance. But the diamond doesn't fight against the pressure. It endures and transforms. You are that diamond. The trials you faced didn't make you bitter. They made you brilliant. And what about those who say you were passive? They don't understand that sometimes the most powerful moves are made in silence. You weren't passive. You were patient and strategic. You watched closely, learned, and waited for the right moment to step forward. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. That's another truth you embodied. You let others reveal their true selves while you stayed above the fray. You didn't waste energy fighting shadows or engaging with people who wanted to see you fall. Instead, you focused on your own growth. You invested in your purpose. You chose integrity over attention, grace over gossip, and long-term vision over short-term wins. That's why your rise caught them off guard. They never saw this kind of strength coming. Imagine this, a chess player watching the board, studying each move with care, not reacting impulsively. You were that player, always thinking several steps ahead. You let others reveal their weaknesses, then quietly moved around them, outsmarting the noise with calm confidence. And calmer, you let it walk right through the front door while you stayed focused on your next level. You didn't waste time on petty battles or getting caught up in drama. You knew your time would come, and you prepared yourself for it. Now, here you are, victorious, standing tall, and still whole. The very things they tried to use to break you became your greatest weapons. Your integrity, your self-control, your refusal to become bitter. Those are the true trophies of your victory. So remember this, you didn't just win a fight. You became the kind of person who can inherit the entire war. You rose above the noise, above the hate, above the chaos, and there's no comeback louder than quiet integrity. You didn't just survive, you mastered the art of winning without losing yourself. That's why it's already yours. Number 3, they mistook your pause for defeat, but you were just being crowned in silence. Silence isn't failure, it's formation. That's the truth they couldn't comprehend. They watched your life go quiet and thought the story had ended. They assumed because you weren't posting wins, you weren't earning them. But while they ran around chasing noise, you were sitting in stillness, sharpening your sword. Imagine this, a volcano sleeping beneath a mountain range, calm on the outside. No movement, no fire, no smoke, just silence. But deep within, pressure is building, the core is shifting, and power is preparing to erupt. That was you. Still, but never stagnant. They thought your delay meant denial. They whispered, "See," they fell off. Nothing's happening for them anymore. But what they didn't see is that you were in a private ceremony with the universe, getting crowned in a room they weren't invited to. Here's what people forget. Real elevation doesn't announce itself. It moves in shadows, molds in quiet, and arrives without warning. You weren't being ignored. You were being groomed. Every second of stillness was strategy. The universe was aligning your inner world before it ever released anything into the outer one. And yes, it was frustrating. You asked, "Why isn't anything happening?" But you didn't fold. You kept working, healing, shedding, learning. You grew roots so deep that no storm could rip you out. You stopped fighting battles that weren't yours to carry. You let go of people who couldn't walk where you were going. That's not a breakdown. That's precision. They ran toward the spotlight. You walked into alignment. They needed claps. You needed clarity. And now, you're glowing different. Doors are swinging open without you knocking. The rooms that once ignored you are sending you invites. Not because you forced it, but because you're finally walking in your real power. You didn't miss your timing. Your timing was mastering you. The delay wasn't a denial. It was your divine preparation. While they were rushing to be seen, you were becoming the one worth watching. And now that it's your season, they're stunned. Because you didn't just arrive, you ascended. Quietly, gracefully, unapologetically. Whatever you did in the silence, it worked. Number 4. You endured the fire without screaming for witnesses, and that's what scorched them. Some people suffer loudly for attention, others suffer quietly for transformation. You were the second kind. You didn't turn your pain into a performance. You didn't cry for applause. And because of that, they underestimated you. They didn't realize that silence isn't weakness, it's strength under pressure. You were bleeding behind the scenes, but they couldn't see it. You were breaking, healing, rebuilding, all without a single spotlight. And imagine this, a lion licking its wounds in the shadows, not because it's scared, but because it knows its comeback isn't supposed to be watched, it's supposed to be felt. That was you, quiet, wounded, but never defeated. You didn't advertise your suffering, you survived it. And that's what made it so lethal. You could have played the victim. You could have broadcasted every betrayal, every scar, every setback, but you chose the higher path. You faced your pain alone, without begging for comfort or begging for pity. That's a level of self-mastery most will never reach. You became your own shelter in the storm, and while they mocked your stillness, you were growing roots so deep they'll never be able to cut you down again. They thought your silence meant surrender. What they didn't know was that you were doing work they couldn't even comprehend. You were confronting the wounds they would have drowned in. You sat with your demons, stared them down, and made peace with your own reflection. That's not weakness, that's warfare, quiet warfare, and you won. You studied your scars like maps, not to stay stuck in the past, but to understand how to never end up there again. You let the pain teach you, but never define you. You didn't just survive it, you understood it. You didn't numb it, you honored it. That's why when they see you now, they can't recognize you, because the version of you they thought they destroyed no longer exists. Here's what really burns them. You didn't fall apart, even though you had every reason to. You rose without help, without praise, without the need to prove anything. They expected you to come back begging. Instead, you came back glowing, with sharp edges and calm eyes. You didn't suffer for pity, you suffered for purpose. And now, you're walking proof that healing in private creates power that can't be faked. That's why it worked. Because you didn't make the pain your identity, you made it your rebirth. Number 5. You let them dig their own graves. You just kept climbing. Revenge is loud, but elevation is quiet and undefeated. You could have clapped back. You could have exposed everything. You had the truth loaded like bullets ready to fire, but you didn't. And that's what cuts deeper than any receipt ever could. You didn't stoop. You soared. While they were busy throwing dirt on your name, you were using that same dirt to plant your next move. Imagine this, someone throwing rocks at a mountain, hoping it crumbles, but the mountain doesn't budge. It grows taller with time, wind, and storms. That mountain is you. They tried to chip away at your image, but the universe was busy carving your legacy, and the irony, you didn't even have to respond. They exposed themselves through desperation, while you built in silence. Here's the fact they can't stomach. The more they lied, the more your truth started shining. Not because you shouted it, but because elevation reveals what deception tries to hide. You chose peace, and peace chose to protect you. You trusted that time would tell what words never could. And now it's speaking loudly, without you saying a thing. They expected rage. You gave them restraint. They expected chaos. You gave them calm, and that's why they lost. You didn't need to post sub-tweets or drop receipts. You weren't interested in playing in the mud while you were on your way to the sky. And that's what makes you dangerous in a way they can't touch. Your growth became the very spotlight they couldn't survive under. You became proof that discipline is louder than drama. They wanted to provoke you into looking messy because that would make their lies easier to believe. But you held your character like a sword, and while they flailed around trying to control the story was already turning against them. You were never fighting for attention. You were locked in on your purpose, and that's why your glow hurts their eyes now, because it was never about being right in front of them. It was about becoming real in front of the universe. Now they sit with the silence they mocked you for. They watch the elevation they said you'd never reach, and they realize you didn't need revenge. You needed alignment, and you got it. That's why it worked, because you never let bitterness hijack your mission. You let truth walk at its own pace, and now it's arriving, loud and undeniable. Number 6. You looked lost to them, but you were just walking a path they'll never understand. Elevation looks like isolation to those who aren't assigned to your destiny. They watched you fall back, go quiet, disappear from the noise, and they assumed you were losing. They mistook your silence for defeat, your absence for failure. But that's only because your journey didn't come with a public explanation. And that's exactly why it worked. You didn't pull back because you were broken. You pulled back because you were being rebuilt. What they saw as retreat was actually strategy. While they were performing for the crowd, you were protecting something sacred. Every move you made was intentional. Every no was calculated. Every closed door was protection in disguise. Imagine a spacecraft entering orbit. It has to shed parts of itself to rise higher. That's what you were doing. You were shedding distractions, fake support, unnecessary noise. You didn't want to look distant. You had to be distant. You didn't want to seem withdrawn. You were being recalibrated for what was next. But to people who need attention to feel alive, your distance looked like death. They couldn't comprehend the blueprint because it wasn't made for them. You moved on instructions they couldn't hear, and that's why they judged you. They said you were falling off, when really you were leveling up. They couldn't recognize the silence was sacred. They couldn't decode the stillness because they weren't meant to. They called it ego because you stopped giving them access. They called it fear because you didn't rush to grab every shiny opportunity. But you were never chasing optics. You were obeying your internal compass. You weren't running from failure. You were walking into alignment. And now that the results are showing, they're speechless, because it doesn't make sense. You didn't market your glow, but it's blinding. You didn't campaign for favor, but it found you. You didn't explain a thing, but the outcome is undeniable. That's what confuses them the most. You didn't do it their way, and still you won. You didn't take the loud road. You took the led road. The one filled with detours, delays, and deep trust. The one only the chosen understand. So let them whisper, let them wonder, let them try to figure out the math. But here's the truth. What the universe builds in you doesn't need proof. It becomes the proof. You didn't lose your way. You followed one they'll never be allowed to walk. That's why you won. Number 7. They tried to outsmart you, but you were already 10 steps ahead in silence. Wisdom doesn't scream, it watches. And that's exactly what broke them. They thought they had you cornered, outplayed, emotionally triggered. They were playing checkers while you were decoding blueprints for a game they didn't even know existed. They underestimated your discernment because it wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself, but it was lethal. They played dirty, mind games, smirks behind your back, manipulation behind fake kindness. They spread whispers like poison, hoping you'd react, explode, expose yourself, but you didn't. You smiled, nodded, and quietly rewrote the entire game board without ever letting them see your hand. You weren't ignoring the signs. You were reading them like subtitles. Every shift in energy, every fake compliment, every sudden mood change. You caught it before it turned into sabotage. Imagine a hawk soaring miles above the ground. It sees the snake slithering in the grass long before it ever strikes. You were that hawk, elevated, watching, calculated. You didn't fall for their bait because you were never operating at their level. While they were busy plotting in the physical, you were aligned with something much deeper, something internal, something ancient. You moved with awareness, not emotion. They wanted you to fight back. They wanted the meltdown, the receipts, the reaction. But you stayed composed, surgical. You cut access, not corners. You didn't need to prove anything because your energy told the truth louder than words ever could. They thought silence was weakness, but they forgot. Still, water runs deep. And yours ran miles below the surface. You knew what peace felt like, and the second something disrupted that, you were gone. No scene, no announcement, just distance. And that's what shattered their illusion of control. They couldn't understand how you knew so much without being told, but discernment isn't guesswork. It's soul-level perception. It's when your spirit speaks before logic does. And yours? It was flawless. You were never blindsided. They were just shocked you saw through them so early. They set emotional traps, and you walked right around them. That's not luck. That's spiritual clarity sharpened through pain. You weren't fighting to win petty battles. You were protecting your peace, guarding your crown, and choosing precision over performance. By the time they realized you weren't reacting, you were already rising. And now you're untouchable, not because you're invisible, but because you see everything. That's why it worked. That's why you won. Number 8. You didn't escape the fire. You let it mold you into steel. The fire didn't break you, it built you. That's the line that keeps echoing every time someone tries to figure out how you're still standing. They saw what you went through, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the emotional ambushes, the constant mental war that should have left you in ruins. And for a while, it almost did. Almost. But you weren't made of smoke and ashes. You were made of grit. And instead of falling apart, you hardened into something they can't even scratch now. Imagine metal going into the forge, burned, beaten, reshaped by heat so intense most would melt into nothing. But you didn't melt. You didn't crumble. You endured every degree of pain, every ounce of pressure, and came out unrecognizable in the best way. Not charred, not fragile, reinforced. They thought your silence meant damage. They thought your distance meant defeat. But what really happened was transformation. You didn't just survive the fire, you absorbed it. It fused into your bones, rewired your spirit, and made you immune to the chaos that used to wreck you. You're not bitter, you're just not movable anymore. That old version of you, the one that flinched at every rejection, that over-explained, that needed validation to breathe, is gone, dead, buried in the ashes of your last storm. And that's exactly what they don't understand. They keep talking to the past you. They keep pressing the same buttons, expecting the same cracks. But those buttons, they don't even exist anymore. You've been through too much to react to petty attacks. The pressure trained you. The pain shaped you. You faced your own darkness and didn't blink. And now when chaos shows up, you don't panic. You analyze. You observe. You decide. That's power most people never earn. And here's what really stings for them. You're not cold. You're not heartless. You're just experienced. You've seen the worst, felt the weight of the world, and still chose to heal. You still chose to rise. You chose peace, not numbness. Clarity, not revenge. Boundaries, not bitterness. That kind of growth scares people who are still dancing with their demons. So now they say you've changed, and you have, but not for them, for you, for your life, for your future, and the crown you wear now. It wasn't gifted, it was forged, in fire. You didn't just make it through the furnace, you became fireproof. That's why nothing they throw now can touch you. That's why it worked. That's why you won. Number 9. They tried to bury you in shame, but you used that dirt to lay the first brick. Humiliation doesn't kill the chosen, it awakens them. They thought embarrassing you would erase you. They thought public disrespect, private mockery, and cold rejection would be your breaking point. They thought you'd go quiet because of shame. But what they failed to realize is that humiliation doesn't just strip ego, it activates truth. They didn't bury you, they planted you. And what grew from that moment is something they can't even comprehend. Yes, it hurt. You bled in places no one could see. It cut deep because it was personal. It wasn't just a betrayal of your name, it was a violation of your soul. But instead of turning bitter, you got better. Instead of letting it define you, you let it refine you. Imagine standing in front of a mirror with nothing left to protect you. No praise, no approval, no applause. Just you and your wounds. That's where you met your real self. Not the version that performed. Not the version that wanted to be understood. The version that stood alone and said, "This pain won't make me smaller. It's going to make me solid." You didn't use the shame to seek revenge. You used it to strip away illusions. You stopped people-pleasing. You stopped over-explaining. You let the silence teach you where your real value lived, deep beneath the surface, where no one else's opinion could reach. Most people let humiliation turn them cold. You let it carve depth into your spirit, not weakness, wisdom. You started moving different, choosing peace over performance, alignment over applause, healing over hype. While they laughed, you listened. While they pointed, you planted. You didn't need to post your progress. You just kept building in the background. And now they're confused because you didn't come back louder. You came back stronger. You didn't chase vindication. You chased purpose. You weren't fueled by anger. You were rooted in awareness. You didn't want to look victorious. You wanted to be whole. You weren't building an empire to impress anyone. You were building it to protect the version of yourself that refused to die. No matter how deep they tried to bury you, you used every tear like mortar, every rejection like stone. That's why it's lasting. That's why it's yours. This isn't some flashy comeback. This is slow, sacred, unstoppable elevation. And it worked because you didn't use shame to hide. You used it to rise. They thought they humiliated you, but all they really did was hand you bricks. Number 10. You didn't break down doors. You became the whole damn lock system. You stopped knocking and became the door frame they now need to walk through. That's the part that has them shaken. While they were busy clawing for invites, faking smiles for seats, and shouting over crowds just to be seen, you went inward. You didn't beg. You didn't plead. You built. You weren't chasing rooms. You were building yourself into the kind of presence that makes rooms rearrange when you enter. That's what happens when you stop looking for permission and start honoring your own evolution. Imagine a lighthouse. It doesn't run up and down the shore screaming for ships to notice it. It just stands there, unwavering, beaming its light into the dark. The right vessels always find it. That's you now. You became a beacon, not by trying to fit in, but by becoming exactly who you're supposed to be. You didn't hustle to be chosen. You healed to become undeniable. While they were fighting for attention, you were aligning. You were dealing with your shadows, untangling your identity, stripping away ego and noise until all that was left was truth. And that truth is magnetic. It pulls what's meant for you without you having to lift a finger. They don't understand it, and that's why they whisper. How did they get in? Who opened that door for them? The answer? You did. Not by force, not by luck, but by frequency. You became the key because you aligned with the lock. You fit, not because you conformed, but because you evolved. Doors that once slammed in your face are now cracking open on their own, not out of pity, out of respect. And the rooms that once overlooked you, they're now adjusting their lighting just to accommodate your presence. But you're not chasing them, because you've already learned any door that requires you to shrink isn't worth walking through. This isn't strategy, this is surrender. This is what happens when you stop trying to impress and start embodying who you really are. Your clarity created pull. Your peace became power. Your silence built momentum that no spotlight ever could. Now people are circling back. Opportunities are resurfacing. But here's the twist. You're not desperate anymore. You're discerning. You know what fits. You know your value. And that self-awareness, it's your crown. You're not just in the room. You are the room. And that's why it worked. Because you didn't force anything. You became everything. Number 11. You didn't chase a crowd. You claimed the crown. You don't need the spotlight when your presence is the light. That's the power they never saw coming. They thought you were slipping because you weren't performing. They assumed silence meant you were shrinking. But the truth is, you weren't disappearing. You were being deputized behind the scenes. You weren't seeking popularity. You were stepping into power. Applause. You learned that's the weakest currency out there. It's loud today, gone tomorrow. People clap for chaos just as fast as they cancel peace. So you stopped measuring your worth by how loud the room got. When you entered, you stopped depending on noise to feel valuable. You didn't need to be seen. You needed to be sent. Imagine a soldier training in the dark, long before anyone knows their name. No medals, no audience, just discipline, grit, and focus. That was you. You weren't chasing relevance. You were gaining rank. Not in people's eyes, but in the quiet, unseen realm where real authority is earned, not gifted. And that's the shift that scares them. You walk different now, not because of ego, but because you carry weight they can't explain. While others were obsessed with going viral, you were going vertical, deeper in purpose, higher in alignment. You weren't building a brand, you were becoming a force. They didn't understand your silence, so they called it failure. They didn't understand your retreat, so they labeled it rejection. But what they never saw was the sacred promotion happening beneath it all. While they were busy being liked, you were being licensed, and not by people, by something much greater. You no longer explain your distance. You no longer justify your standards. You're not looking for stage lights to validate your mission, because when your authority comes from alignment, not applause, no one can cancel what they didn't commission. You're not just surviving rooms anymore, you're anchoring them. You've developed the kind of inner strength that doesn't sway when public opinion shifts. You don't need a fan base. You have foundation, and that's what keeps you standing while others crumble under pressure. That's why this season feels different, because you're no longer asking to be seen. You're walking in what you've already become, and while they're still auditioning for relevance, you're moving with authority. You didn't need the audience. You became the assignment. Number 12, you didn't just survive the process, you turned it into a blueprint. Most run from the process. You turned around and studied it. That's the move that separates the average from the unshakable. While others were begging for shortcuts, you sat with the struggle. You didn't just endure it, you dissected it. You peeled back every layer of pain, setback, delay, and silence until you could read the pattern like a language. That's not survival, that's mastery. They thought you were stuck. They thought you were circling the same pain, the same lesson, the same delay. But the truth, you were gathering data. You were decoding yourself. You weren't going through hell for no reason. You were extracting meaning from every moment of it. Imagine a blacksmith hammering steel under fire. Every strike, every burn, every intense blast of heat has a purpose. It strengthens the blade. That was your process. The pressure didn't just hit you, it formed you. You didn't flinch. You didn't fake healing to get it over with. You let the fire stay until the shape of you changed permanently. While most checked out, got bitter, blamed everyone else, drowned in comparison, you leaned in. You weren't waiting with clenched fists and a ticking clock. You were watching, listening, growing. You stopped asking, when will this end? And started asking, what else can I refine before it does? That shift? It changed everything. You stopped craving instant answers. You embraced alignment. You knew if the blessing arrived before the character was ready, it would break you. So you chose to be built from the inside out. That's what they don't understand. This glow didn't come from luck. It came from labor. Not in public, not for praise, but in silence, in solitude, with nothing but truth to guide you. You learned to stop sprinting toward moments and started training for maintenance, because you're not just receiving, you're stewarding. You're not just manifesting, you're sustaining. You didn't just want the breakthrough, you wanted to be ready for it. And now you are. The peace you carry, earned. The clarity, fought for. The wisdom, paid in full with every night you didn't give up, every trigger you sat with, every cycle you chose to end. You didn't just make it, you understood it. That's why what's coming will last, because you didn't rush. You mastered the process, and that mastery made you unstoppable. Number 13. They studied your moves, but they still couldn't replicate your power. They copied the steps, but they couldn't walk your storm. That's what they'll never admit. They watched you like a blueprint, like a cheat code to a life they never earned. They studied your tone, your confidence, your glow, hoping if they moved like you, they could become you. But what they missed is this. You didn't get here through mimicry. You got here through mastery, through nights that almost broke your mind, through lessons that shattered your pride, through losses that rebuilt your soul from scratch. Imagine someone trying to replicate a masterpiece without knowing the artist's struggle. They think matching the brushstrokes is enough, but they don't understand what it cost you to even hold the brush. That's why no matter how close they get, something's always off. Your essence can't be cloned. It wasn't downloaded. It was developed in darkness. They want your spotlight, but not your scars. They want your results, but not your refinement. And so they walk around draped in your style, but empty of your substance. That's why the universe keeps protecting your lane, because it's tailor-made for your soul. You didn't rehearse this. You earned this. You lived through what they couldn't have survived. That's why your glow isn't loud. It's undeniable. Number 14. You stopped explaining and started elevating. Silence is what happens when elevation no longer needs permission. You reached that point, the breaking point, the awakening point, where proving your worth felt like begging for crumbs. You realized that some people weren't confused about your value, they were threatened by it. So you stopped clarifying your heart to people who only listened to twist it. You stopped watering dead conversations just to keep the peace. And that's when everything shifted. You didn't fold, you floated higher. You got quiet, not because you were lost, but because you were outgrowing noise that couldn't carry your next level. You turned down the volume on the world and turned up the frequency on your mission. And while they were dissecting your past, you were already living in your future. Imagine a rocket at liftoff. It shakes, it rattles, it thunders, but once it breaks through the atmosphere, silence, stillness. That's where you are now, above the nonsense, past the proving. They're still shouting at the launch pad, and you're already orbiting new dimensions. You no longer argue with confusion. You lead with clarity. No more explanations, just evolution. And now that you're gone, they're realizing they never even deserved the conversation.